Michigan men have been arrested in Uniontown for their alleged connection to a drug pipeline between Detroit and Pennsylvania.
Fayette County DA telling us this may be just the beginning of a major crackdown.
3 o'clock in the morning in Traverse City, Michigan, a place known for crystal clear lakes and quiet tourism, suddenly descends into lethal darkness. Hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and heroin slip through the iconic tourist port, all under the direction of the last person anyone would suspect, Port Director Dana Whitford. A formidable figure who turned the harbor into her personal gateway for the Sinaloa Cartel, laundered hundreds of millions through tribal casinos, bought off the Coast Guard, and turned northern Michigan schools into drug markets. Tonight, 620 federal agents launch a coordinated strike gunfire rippling across the frozen lakeshore. This isn't just the biggest drug bust in Michigan's history. It's the story of an entire region quietly overtaken from within by organized crime. Are you ready to confront the dark truth? Northern Michigan has been deeply infiltrated. Criminal networks are mobilizing on an overwhelming scale. At 3 o'clock in the morning in Traverse City, Michigan, a sweeping crisis descends without warning. Organized crime rings are quietly drowning entire communities in a surge of illicit goods. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Homeland Security are launching an emergency raid on the Port Director's office. Late-night cargo zones and casinos funneling millions in laundered money, all of it forms a bleak portrait of a Michigan pushed to the brink of collapse. Exactly at 3 o'clock in the morning, northern Michigan is placed on high alert. What began as a routine inspection at Traverse City Port rapidly spiraled into one of the most alarming maritime security breaches in the state's history. FBI and DHS agents forced open a container flagged as priority import cargo, only to find a lethal stockpile of illegal narcotics hidden inside. The haul totaled 200 kilograms of fentanyl, 500 kilograms of methamphetamine, and 62 kilograms of heroin, enough to devastate entire major cities had it reached the streets. Alongside the massive drug load, agents uncovered an industrial-grade GPS jammer, a piece of specialized equipment designed to make cartel vessels disappear from Coast Guard tracking systems. Every crate carried the unmistakable insignia of the Sinaloa Cartel, but the real shock came from the attached documentation. Every signature, permit, and clearance code traced back to one person, Port Director Dana Whitford. Federal teams stormed her office just minutes later. Inside, they found $2.3 million in cash, meticulously packed into waterproof suitcases, 14 restricted access badges issued to unidentified individuals, a loaded 9mm pistol, and detailed plans for expanding an inland fuel pipeline, actually a cover for an underground smuggling corridor meant to drive Sinaloa product deep into Michigan territory. Faced with this evidence, the truth was impossible to deny. For 4 years, Whitford had quietly turned a peaceful tourist harbor into a purpose-built gateway for organized crime. This investigation has cut deep into Michigan's hidden network. The port director of Traverse City, Michigan, has been arrested for operating a smuggling pipeline for the Sinaloa Cartel. As federal investigators probe deeper into the records seized from Dana Whitford's office, the scale of her operation proved far darker than simple smuggling assistance. Whitford hadn't merely allowed cartel cargo to slip through Traverse City, she had built an entire maritime distribution network stretching deep into northern lower Michigan. Over 4 years of quietly reshaping the port's shipping schedules, she established 4 covert receiving zones around Grand Traverse Bay, isolated, unmonitored pockets where cartel shipments could be offloaded under the cover of darkness with virtually no oversight. These locations aligned precisely with Coast Guard logs documenting unexplained vessel movements and mysterious maintenance lights flickering along the shoreline at night. The trail of bribes made the picture even sharper. Federal interviews confirmed that Whitford had been issuing monthly payments to multiple Coast Guard officers, granting Sinaloa boats access to the so-called fast lane, a clearance channel supposedly reserved only for emergency or high-priority maritime traffic. Investigators found that some vessels were approved in under 7 minutes, completely bypassing inspection procedures that typically take hours. But the most unsettling revelations didn't come from the port, they came from the community. Distribution maps revealed a direct pipeline from Whitford shipments to 7 high schools scattered across northern Michigan. Teachers had already reported a sharp surge in methamphetamine and counterfeit pills among students, some as young as 15. Local dealers told undercover agents that product up north was cheap, potent, and never out of supply. At the same time, Traverse City had quietly become a dumping ground for out-of-county drug offenders sent there for treatment, a policy loophole that flooded the region with untreated addicts and vulnerable individuals who were quickly targeted by local distributors. This was no longer a single smuggling route. It was a systemic collapse engineered from within the port and allowed to spread through neighborhoods, schools, and entire towns. By the time agents finished mapping the sites connected to Dana Whitford Geld's operation, one conclusion was impossible to ignore. Northern Michigan had been compromised from the shoreline to the inland forests. More than 41 locations, including warehouses, boathouses, fishing cabins, storage yards, and even abandoned resorts, were all tied to her maritime pipeline. Federal command knew they couldn't take the sites down one at a time. They needed a full simultaneous strike. At 2:30 in the morning, inside an FBI security coordination room in Traverse City, the order was issued: launch Operation Northern Breakwater. Within moments, 620 agents from the FBI, DHS, and DEA surged toward pre-staged vehicles across Petoskey, Alpena, Mackinac City, and the Grand Traverse region. What had started as a quiet night along the lakeshore erupted into a storm of flashing blue lights, armored convoys, and the hard, slicing roar of helicopter rotors cutting through the frigid November air. The first strike team hit a riverside warehouse just south of Clinch Park, believed to be the main receiving hub for Whitford's fast lane boats. The instant agents blasted through the steel doors with explosives. Chaos erupted inside. Sinaloa lookouts hidden among stacks of fish crates fired blindly toward the entry point. Flashbang grenades exploded, flooding the space with blinding white light as tactical teams pressed forward in tight formation. Within minutes, agents secured 112 sealed packages ready for distribution. If the familiar port director you trusted had been quietly clearing hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl every week, would you have noticed any warning signs at all? Meanwhile, in Petoskey, a 3-story storage building resisted capture. The criminals inside had reinforced the ground floor with steel plates and improvised barricades. As the breach team advanced, gunmen opened fire from the second-floor balcony, pinning down the initial assault wave. A DHS armored vehicle surged forward, taking heavy fire before smashing through the barricaded entrance. The firefight lasted precisely 14 minutes, ending only when federal agents overwhelmed the defenders with coordinated stairwell advances. Farther east, near Alpena, Coast Guard tactical units intercepted 2 small boats attempting to escape into deeper waters. Floodlights from hovering helicopters turned the bay into daylight as boat crews shouted commands in English and Spanish. When one vessel sped toward open water, a Coast Guard cutter cut across its bow, forcing the crew to surrender. The most intense confrontation took place outside Charlevoix, where agents discovered a remote storage yard tucked behind a lumber mill. As they closed in, 3 pickup trucks attempted to flee down a narrow forest road. Drones tracked their movements from above, guiding ground units into position. A roadblock was established near a clearing. Spike strips were deployed. Engines roared, brakes screamed. One truck tried to ram through the barricade but was trapped when federal vehicles closed in from both sides. Occupants were dragged out and subdued while the remaining trucks surrendered. By dawn, all 18 strike teams had reported complete mission success. Dozens of suspects were in custody. Drug caches, weapons, and maritime equipment were secured. Northern Michigan had just witnessed the largest anti-cartel operation in state history, a single night in which federal forces reclaimed every inch of territory Dana Whitford had handed over to the Sinaloa organization. As the dust settled after the all-night raids, federal analysts returned to a quieter battlefield conference tables inside the temporary command center, where laptop servers, seized documents, and external drives from Dana Whitford's office lay spread out like artifacts from a hidden criminal regime. What investigators uncovered in the hours that followed was not chaos but chilling precision. A financial system engineered with the meticulous discipline of a multinational corporation. The first breakthrough came from a locked steel briefcase retrieved from beneath Whitford's desk. Inside were 37 consulting accounts tied to shell companies with innocuous names like Great Lakes Marine Advisors, North Shores Development, and Harbor Efficiency Group. At first glance, they seemed like ordinary vendor programs. But as forensic accountants probed deeper, every single account traced directly to the arrival of specific vessels, aligning timestamps from Coast Guard logs and container scans with surgical accuracy. Every invoice perfectly mirrored the movement of an illicit shipment. Whitford had constructed a three-tier financial pipeline. Tier 1, port to casino. Money collected at the docks from delivery fees and drug profits was funneled into 2 tribal casinos. There, Whitford's associates used slot machines, table chips, and player cards registered under fake identities to launder millions of dollars in cartel revenue. Local seniors later recalled strangers arriving at the casinos in the dead of night, placing large bets, cashing out swiftly, and disappearing just as quietly. Tier 2, casino to Mexico. Once the funds appeared clean, they were wired in structured amounts to accounts in Arizona and Wisconsin. These accounts were managed by cartel money movers. From there, the funds flowed south to Mexico through cryptocurrency platforms and remittance channels disguised as business refunds. Tier 3, Mexico, back to Michigan. The cycle closed when Sinaloa wired money directly back to Whitford's shell companies under the guise of coastal improvement investments or maritime consulting contracts. The entire system ran like clockwork week after week. The single most damning piece of evidence was a hidden spreadsheet tucked inside a folder labeled Q2 Logistics. In plain text, it recorded weekly inbound funds of $4.7 million, proof that Whitford's network was funneling an average of $4.7 million every 7 days straight into the cartel's pockets. In total, agents estimated that more than $163.4 million had been laundered through these casino channels. But the investigation didn't stop at the money. Analysts uncovered a second trove of documents, internal memos, encrypted chat logs, and Coast Guard clearance requests showing that Whitford had been paying $12,000 a month to 3 identified Coast Guard officers in exchange for smooth passage of suspicious vessels. Some of those officers even flagged their own colleagues for reassignment to ensure only cooperating crews were on duty during cartel deliveries. Further analysis revealed an outer ring of enablers beyond the Port 4 casino managers who routinely approved high-value chip conversions without documentation, and 2 real estate developers who leased lakeside cabins later converted into distribution hubs. The evidence revealed a devastating reality. This was not mere corruption. It was financial colonization, a hostile takeover of northern Michigan's economy, orchestrated by organized crime with Whitford as its chief architect. What began at the port had quietly and methodically spread into the region's banks, casinos, development projects, and maritime infrastructure. Federal agents now realized they weren't simply dismantling a smuggling ring, they were tearing apart a shadow economy the cartel had built along the shores of Lake Michigan. While financial teams traced the money laundering operations Whitford had engineered, a separate investigative unit was tasked with a different mission, measuring the human toll she had left behind. What they uncovered over the next 48 hours was not just criminal activity, it was a regional collapse, a slow-motion unraveling of northern Michigan's social fabric that had gone unnoticed for years. The first unmistakable sign of collapse appeared in the medical data as overdose cases in Grand Traverse surged 310% in just 3 years. The crisis spilled beyond the city, sweeping into quiet lakeside towns and retirement communities, forcing EMS to respond in places that had never seen emergencies before, like boat docks and gas stations. Investigators found that Whitford's product had moved through an underground distribution network spanning 27 small towns. There, local opportunists became micro-distribution hubs pushing fentanyl and meth at breakneck speed. Supply was so abundant that street prices plummeted to record lows, deliberately flooding the region with a meticulously engineered addiction pandemic. The real tragedy unfolded when 7 high schools stretching from Traverse City to Gaylord were swept up in the wave of illicit substances. Teachers were left stunned as drugs reached students as easily as soft drinks, while school hallways reeked of chemicals drifting from lockers. Parents watched helplessly as their children fell before they could even understand what was happening, a direct result of Whitford's pipeline. At the same time, the region faced another crisis from the influx of relocated parolees sent in from other areas. The criminal network ruthlessly exploited these vulnerable homeless individuals, turning them into runners, bait, or mules within the dark money laundering machine. Many workers were paid in drugs instead of cash, fueling a devastating surge in addiction. Small businesses bore the brunt. Convenience stores and motels along the highways became late-night deal spots for Whitford's network, with some lakeside motels quietly converted into temporary stash houses. Neighbors mistook the unusual traffic for seasonal tourism, when in reality it was a criminal logistics system silently taking control of the region. Law enforcement was stretched to the breaking point by record-breaking thefts, roadside arrests, and rising violence, all perfectly aligned with the drug supply routes, while remaining completely unaware that the nerve center was right inside the Traverse City Harbor Master's office. It began quietly with the expansion of fuel pipelines, cleverly disguised to hide the construction of a secret smuggling channel. Over time, she layered in new elements: compliant casino managers, bribed Coast Guard officers, shell company accountants, and local distributors who funneled product into schools, motels, and small-town neighborhoods. By the time federal agencies finally acted, she had transformed Traverse City Harbor into a fully operational Sinaloa gateway. What appeared as scattered criminal incidents, overdoses, violent disputes, and sudden spikes in cash flow were actually the visible symptoms of a single hidden machine. The fallout from Operation Northern Breakwater spread across the state within hours. Dozens of organization members were taken into federal custody, including several carrying fake maritime IDs directly linked to Whitford's office. Seemingly harmless port employees were suddenly exposed as strategically placed gatekeepers tasked with blocking inspections and rerouting vessel tracking. 3 Coast Guard officers admitted to receiving steady monthly payments from Whitford to clear suspicious boats through restricted lanes. And 4 casino supervisors confessed to rubber stamping massive chip conversions without documentation, laundering millions in illicit profits. What shocked investigators most was how quickly the numbers stacked up. The seized narcotics, fentanyl, methamphetamine, and heroin aligned perfectly with the overdose spikes that had swept the region. The cash found in Whitford's office matched ledger entries detailing the organization's weekly income flow, and the money laundered through the 2 tribal casinos traced directly to the estimated volume processed via chip exchanges and slot machine cycles. For the first time, federal agencies could see the full architecture of the operation, not in fragments, but as a single tightly run enterprise. Whitford was apprehended 7 hours after the raid began, hiding inside a rented cabin near Torch Lake. She offered no resistance, but investigators observed a hint of relief, as if the collapse of her criminal empire had long been inevitable. Her arrest marked the end of the most sophisticated maritime infiltration Michigan had ever faced. Yet it left questions that no one could ignore. As federal teams prepared their final briefings, one conclusion rose above all the data. Northern Michigan hadn't merely been exploited, it had been meticulously engineered into a cartel gateway, quietly, efficiently, and almost undetected. Operation Northern Breakwater had shut that gateway down, but its lesson resonated far beyond the shoreline. Northern Michigan may have survived this operation, but the warning it carried went far beyond one port, one director, or one cartel pipeline. What happened here is a lesson every community must confront. Corruption never announces itself with sirens. It creeps in quietly through trusted positions, routine-looking paperwork, unquestioned signatures, and small changes that seem harmless until the day everything collapses at once. Dana Whitford didn't build this empire overnight. She built it one unchecked decision at a time, one unreported shipment, one cleared vessel, one bought officer. The Dana Whitford story delivers a bone-chilling lesson. The deadliest corruption isn't the gunfire or the duffel bags of bribe money. It's the seemingly harmless signatures on clearance forms, the schedule tweaks just to be more efficient, the charity donations to local schools. One person positioned in the right seat of power and patient for years can turn a tourist harbor into a narco gateway and schools into drug markets without anyone noticing until it's too late. The vulnerability isn't at some distant border. It's hidden in the blind belief that it can't happen here. Keep asking questions, keep verifying, because silence itself is complicity. As the sun rises over Grand Traverse Bay, northern Michigan has reclaimed its shoreline, but the scars remain hundreds of broken families, schools forever marked by dark memories, and a costly lesson the nation cannot afford to forget. Dana Whitford proved that a single person in a position of power can quietly hand an entire region over to organized crime. Operation Northern Breakwater slammed that door shut, but how many other Whitfords are sitting in seemingly harmless offices right now? Drop a comment. What do you think is the biggest vulnerability that lets crime seep into our communities, the ports, the casinos, or plain human complacency? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next hidden truth. See you soon.